Hey everybody, Scott Detweiler here with another action-packed episode of Couch to Photoshop. And today our victim is going to be the lovely Jennifer from Chicago. She's a ballerina, and I will link to her stuff down in the comments below so you can go ahead and apologize to her for all the horrible things we're going to do today. So what we're going to do is actually kind of get into image manipulation a bit. So we've already covered the basics of layers in the interface. We've covered some masking and some brushwork, and now we're going to get into actual manipulation. So my favorite manipulation tool is probably the hue and saturation adjustment layer. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to actually add an overlay or texture to this and modify that as well, and kind of take it to more of a piece of art than kind of the snapshot that it is now. This is straight out of camera, and I'm happy with the image. The pose is good. The lighting is fine. Where can we take this? So let's start off with talking about how to get to that point. So window and adjustments has this menu on it. And if you remember from our first episode, we actually tore that off of here and got rid of it. So I don't like these little icons. I don't remember what they mean most of the time, and hovering over them telling me the text isn't handy. However, there is one part of this menu that is handy, and that's hidden under the menu here, and it's add mask by default. This is on by default, and if you find this drives you absolutely batty, this is where you need to go to change it. I'll tell you probably won't ever want to change it, but this is where it is. There's also clip to layer, which we're not going to do today, but we're going to, when we do this, we're going to do it manually. Actually, we might end up using this today, but we're not going to leave this as a default. I don't tend to like that. I'm going to get rid of this menu because those exact same things are down here under this little kind of almost yin-yang looking symbol, and you see there they are in English. So I'm going to choose hue and saturation adjustment layer. When you do that, a couple things happen. It creates a new item on the top of our layer stack, and it's got this. When you click on this icon, you're going to see this property window pop up, and it contains all of the controls for this hue and saturation adjustment layer. It also contains a mask, which we learned about last episode, and that mask is set to white by default, meaning everything we do is going to be shown by default. We can change that, but for now, we're just going to kind of make a global change to everything without a mask. So first of all, let's talk about this panel a bit. There's a lot going on here, and it's not that complicated when you kind of break down what we're looking at. First of all, you can create presets for things, which we'll talk about later. There are a few in here, but we're not going to worry about presets. My goal is to teach you how to use the application, not to how to use presets. Anybody can do that. So here we have different channels to use, and we have reds, yellows, greens, cyans, blues, and magentas. And you can pick on one of these, and what it's going to do is it's going to all the love in the world happens down here on this bar. The top bar shows you what we have, and the bottom bar shows you what you're going to get. Now, right at this time, they're the same. This little gap in the middle, represented by these two little lines, shows you the actual color we're working on, and then how much it was going to fade into the color on either side. So from the red we're working on kind of fading into an orange yellow, and the red on this side kind of fading into a magenta. So you can actually pick this up and move it by clicking in the middle, but now we're not really talking about reds anymore, are we? We're talking about yellows. And so you can do this, or you can pick it from the menu, or you can make this gap smaller or wider depending on what you're doing. It's very customizable. However, the easiest way to use this tool is to use this little icon here. So we click on it, and then you click on something you want to play with, like this leaf down here. It's going to take and set the bars here. This is the tolerance for how this panel is going to react to the image. To give you an idea of what we're going to do here, I'm just going to grab the hue and I'm going to slide it wildly to one side. So you see the top bar shows us what we had in the original image, the standard rainbow. And below it shows us that middle yellow section is now replaced with a blue. And the colors on either side have been kind of squished in a weird way, and some terrible things are happening. But you see that it really only affected those things that were kind of in that yellow area. So what I like to do is play with my controls pretty wildly and just kind of keep going back and forth until I find a color that I like and make smaller and smaller movements. This is how I tend to work. That way I'm experiencing the full range. I might get a happy surprise or a happy accident, and I say, oh, I didn't think of making the leaves blue. Maybe that's just something really neat I want to do today. And then, be criticized for it on the internet and learn my lesson. But it's an option. So once you have your hue set, and I always start with the hue first, then I can go back and play with the saturation. How much red do I want? Do I want to be made fun of and go this way, all the way? Or do I want to make it reasonable and maybe pull it down just a little bit? I don't know. It's up to you. You're the artist. You do what you want to do. And then how much lightness, or this is the value of it. Do we want it to be brighter? Do we want it to be darker? You can really play with this substantially. I will warn you that when something is white, it doesn't have a saturation or a hue. So if you have something in white in your image and you're trying to mess with it and you're having difficulty colorizing it, that's what this checkbox does. Once you check this box, everything goes haywire and you're basically making a completely different panel out of it. And it's going to affect the entire image, and you're colorizing the whole image effectively. So we're going to reset this panel by clicking on this button here. And we're going to try that again. So we're clicking this little dropper thing. I'm going to pick a leaf. And I'm picking this leaf because it's pretty saturated yellow, and I think that's going to give me a nice place to start here. And then I'm just going to kind of wiggle this until I get to where I want it to be. And I know I want it to be red. I probably don't want it to be the same as her dress, but I want it to be kind of close, but not exact. And I don't want it to be overpoweringly red, maybe. Now, don't judge my art here, okay? I'm just showing you how to use the tool. All right, so once we have something we're happy with, by the way, you can do before and after by clicking on this icon. Click and hold. We'll show you before and after. You can also turn the eyeball on and off like a champion. There you go. And if we zoom in here, we see that it's not really the whole. Look, I'm looking at this one. There's a little bit of yellow on the top and the bottom here. That's from the adjustment of these wing things on the side. So if we zoom back out, I'm just using my mouse wheel for that, by the way, or double click on the hand. We learned that shortcut too. We can adjust how much of the image we affect by playing with these little wings on the side, like we talked about before. Like her dress lives down here in the magentas. We see it's starting to shift as well. It's going to shift anything in this tolerance range. So be a little mindful of what you're doing there. But in general, I'm happy with this change. I think this looks nice. Now, you'll notice that we got a mask with this. And just like we talked about in our last episode, we can play with the mask. So we go down, we hit B for brush, or just hit our brush icon. And we want to be painting black. So again, another keyboard shortcut is X, which changes our foreground color to black, right? So X is the magic one. And remember our brush shortcuts for making it bigger and smaller is Alt right click and move it side to side. Or on the Mac, it's Alt Option and left click and move side to side. It's the two buttons that are next to each other. Not a Mac guy, but you Mac people can make fun of me for that. All right, so what I can do now is I can actually mask out this effect. And say, why would I do that? Well, maybe I want some of these. I'm just going to click randomly, and maybe I'm making some little yellow leaves hither and yon by clicking on this and turning these yellow. Just adding a little variety, perhaps. Who knows? It just, it's your art. Do what you want to do with it. I'm making the brush pretty big here and kind of just going hog wild with it. And so maybe we do that. Maybe I don't want, and by the way, this is the mask I've made. It's quite lovely. Maybe I don't want it this strong, so I can drop the opacity of my brush. So I'm painting with basically a brush that isn't 100% black. It's gray. I can choose white again by hitting X and go back and paint over some of these so they're not quite yellow. They're kind of yellow. I'm not painting over all of them. If I look at my mask, this is the train wreck we've created now. And the nice thing about opacity is that if you click again, you're basically painting over something. Let's do it on the mask to show what I'm talking about. If I click and drag, you see that now the area where I had clicked on before isn't quite white, because 50% opacity plus 50% opacity is not a 100% opacity. It's because we're building up 50% on top of it each time we click. And that can be a little frustrating to deal with, but that's why I tend to work on it this way, so that way I don't have to look at it that way. I'm going to hit X, and I'm just going to kind of paint out some of this effect in places where I want some yellow in here. Remember, I'm still painting with a half opaque brush. And then maybe go back to red a little bit and kind of whittle with it a bit. Okay, good enough. So kind of fun, kind of interesting, maybe a little bit. Who knows? It's okay. Don't criticize my art. Okay, now I can have as many of these as I like, and the beautiful thing about adjustment layers is they really don't add to the file size very much. This is already a pretty big file at 241 meg because it's a Sony AR7 III and it's got a lot of pixels going on. But I can add another one if I'd like. So I can do a hue and saturation adjustment layer again. I can click on that panel, and you see it's bringing up a brand new panel. I can click on something and say I want to affect her dress. So click somewhere that's kind of going to give us the right range of red here. And you can click, and you can actually click and drag when you're using this tool. You don't necessarily have to click and use the panel right away. So the panel's making decisions for you on certain things, but it at least gives you the right tolerance, and then we can go back and, again, change whatever we want to change. But notice it's changing the leaves in the background now. And the reason it's doing that is because my leaves are now red. Remember, we changed them from yellow to red. So now I'm affecting all the reds. So layers are like pieces of glass we talked about before, where the top one affects all the ones below it. So that being said, if I want to affect her dress, I should probably do it before I affect the leaves. So just pick it up and drag it down. And we can rename this so we don't get confused. Just double click on the layer name and just type in what you want. As you get with more complicated files, this is a handy way to stay organized. And I try and do it, but I'm going to say that I just don't. As much as I want to, I'm pretty good at recognizing what my layers do based on the little thumbnail, and that's usually good enough for what I'm doing. So you can see this is a terrible, terrible thing I've done here to her dress. So let's go back and reset that panel. But I can, again, do what I want to do and choose reds here and shift her dress around if I want to. And you see it's picking a lot of other things. Her skin, on her hand, it's probably picking some leaves. So what if you wanted this terrible purple color? And because this is a good idea, right? And you really wanted it, and everyone tells you not to do it, but you can do it anyway because you know better. So what you can do is take the mask, and we can draw on the mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here. I have my brush selected. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. It's still 50% opaque. We got to fix that. Go up to 100%. I'm going to hit X, so I'm painting with black. Sometimes, by the way, when I hit it, my machine makes a wonderful beeping noise, so I'm going to go over and just tap the button anyway. And then I can paint right over her face with the brush. Now you got to be kind of careful because if you hit the dress, you're also going to undo some of that. So see, it's terrible. So paint with white again to cover this up again. And now you have to be careful not to hit her skin, and it gets into one of those situations where you're dealing with trying to get as close as you can without hitting everything. And I'll tell you, you really don't need to overthink this most of the time. Most of the time, a rough approximation, especially for a color shift this minor, isn't really going to be noticed by anybody. So there you go, lovely shade of dress. And now we can play with it all day long because we've masked her out. And you see we do have a couple other things in the picture that are being affected, so we can go and just mask those out as well. I'm still just painting with black on my mask. And I'm just kind of doing a rough job of this. And if we look at our mask, now we've created this piece of fine art. So click back on our panel. And then we can go and change whatever we want to change in here. So our reds, put it wherever you want to put it. Anyway, so I beat that horse. You get that, and it's a horrible thing. We're going to get rid of that. All right, so what else can we do to this? Now, this is one of my favorite things to do is I love overlays. And I have a bunch of leaves here that I shot, and I'm going to bring these into the scene. And I'm going to kind of, you get the ability to move things when you bring them in before you accept it by clicking the checkbox or by hitting enter. And by holding on your shift key, you can lock it to be in these increments. So I just dragged it from bridge into here. And then I'm going to drag it up, and you see it kind of snaps into the corner there. If yours doesn't snap, by the way, it's under View, Snap. And then you can go and grab the other corner. Now, Photoshop recently changed this behavior to make it work like this, where it isn't stretchy. You can hold on your shift key to make that work this way, or hold down, or you can go in and change it to the legacy way. Since I'm assuming all of you are new to Photoshop, you're just going to learn it the way it currently is now. It's probably going to act like this, but if you ever need it to be a little more flexible, just hit your shift key and it will unlock the ratio. So I'm going to hit enter, and it just brought in these lovely leaves. Now, the leaves themselves, we're not going to talk about smart objects today, but it's now part of this image. And I want a mask because I know I'm going to use that. So I'm just going to tap the mask icon so it gives me a mask. And I know that I'm going to want to change the color of these leaves. So I'm going to use a hue and saturation adjustment layer. Now, but I only want this hue and saturation adjustment layer to affect the leaves that we just dragged in. So I'm going to rename this leaf overlay. And this is my leaf color. Now, currently, if I adjust this, you're going to see that it's messing with the whole image, and that's not what I want. I want it to affect only the leaf overlay I just dragged in. So to do that, you can do it a couple ways. One is you can click this icon here, and that will say, I am only going to work on things that are directly below me, on the layer directly below me, and not anything else. That's what this little icon means here. You can also do that in another way, a much more common way, and when you need to know. Just hold on your Alt or Option key and click between the two layers, and you get this little icon here, and that will do the same thing. It's the same as clicking on this button. And now we have this hue and saturation adjustment panel is only playing with these leaves. So now we can play with the leaves and get a color that we want. Make some sort of terrible thing. Maybe like that. I don't know. Don't judge me. Okay. Now, I don't like some of these leaves covering the dress. Maybe it's just a little too gung-ho. That's okay, because this leaf overlay has a mask that comes with it. Now, don't mix that up with the leaf color mask, because if we paint on the leaf color mask, we're taking the color off of that. What we wanted to do is take the leaves and not have them show. So now if I'm painting with my black mask, you see that I'm covering up the leaves that are on this layer. So maybe I want to see something like this. Maybe this little foggy one here goes away too. There we go. So, and we got one on her sleeve. I like to turn the layer on and off to see what was before and what was after, just so that I'm making sure that I'm not doing something silly. And there you go. So I'm happy with that. And so I have my leaf color, and maybe I want to play with that a bit. Maybe I want, again, I'm going to hit the 2 on my keypad, or my number row at the top of my keyboard to turn the opacity. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was my bad. So it depends on the tool you have active as to what's going to happen when you do that. I'm just going to type in the word 20 here, the number 20. Now I'm dealing with a 20% opaque brush that's black. So that's a light gray. So as I paint on these leaves, you'll see, and I'm clicking, I'm holding, I'm not letting up. I'm painting a little bit of yellow. Now if I let up and I paint again, I'm painting another 20% onto the leaf. So just creating a bit of variance is nice. So they're not all the same color. That looks decent. And maybe I want to do the same thing down here. We did some of those in the foreground, or in the background, I should say here. I'm going to hit the 5 on my keyboard to change it to 50% and be a little more aggressive because I'm taking too long. To just kind of change some of these that are just, they're too orange for me. And again, I can go over them twice. That will make them not quite 100%, but it'll make them better. So now we have a little bit more interesting color there. And then to be final with this, I might add one more over the whole thing. And now I can kind of shift things a little bit and say, do I want the whole scene a little warmer, a little colder? What am I looking for? You know, or maybe it's terrible. Like, I don't want our pretty ballerina there to look all pasty. So maybe I won't end up doing this, but I could also just mask out her skin. But in general, this is how you would do a global adjustment when you're done. So I like these, so let's do a before and after. So I'm just clicking and holding on the Alt key and clicking these. Or again, you can click and hold and drag to turn all these on and off. So these are the leaves in the original photo and how we adjusted their redness. And I think they're still a little bit red, by the way. So I'm just going to go back to our panel here, find it, the yellow panel, and give them a little bit more of a golden. That's a little less fakey looking to me. It was just too red. And I don't want it to be the same color as her dress either. That looks a little hokey. And then this panel here is the overlay that we dragged in. And it looks like this. So if I'm going to Alt click on that and I turn the mask off, otherwise it's going to cover some of those leaves. I'm just Alt clicking to show you what it looks like. And if I Alt click again, you can see them here in the image. And if I shift click to turn the mask on and off, we can see what leaves we hid and what ones we allowed through. So that looks good to me. And then finally, this layer is affecting only the leaf overlay, and we brought that in. Now you can also play with this one. Instead of using the brush to paint, you can also adjust the opacity of this layer completely. So if we turn it to 0, obviously it's not doing anything. Maybe the effect's a little strong, so we can make it 70% effective. The same with the leaf color that we changed originally. You know, if we want to bring that back a bit, we can adjust it. I find that I tend to play with the image quite a bit until I'm happy with it. And it's nothing wrong with you going back and digging through previous layers to make changes. And once we're done, we just save it. So I use Control S on my keyboard, and I hit Control S every time I think about hitting Control S, which is about every 10 minutes or so. There are ways to set up automated saving, which we'll talk about later. But for now, just remember to every time you think about, I should save my image, just hit Control S, because you can continue working while it's working. There's no reason for you to stop. So that's about it for this episode. So we covered a lot. We went through adding a texture overlay, colorizing it, colorizing specific pieces of the scene that are already there. And there's a lot more to this panel we're going to cover later, but for now, this is plenty. And now you have the ability to actually go and mess with some parts of your images using the mask and the combination of the hue adjustment layer. So if you liked this video, please click the like button below. Say 1 out of every 100 users only bothers to click the like button, and it's very important to me. If you want to see more episodes, it helps people see the video, which again motivates me to get out and make more of them. So until next time, I'd love to see what you're making, and really practice it. Don't just watch the video and walk away. Open an image and follow along, and I will catch you next time.